The note was written on the back of an order ticket, the handwriting small and shaky, pressed into the paper like the person writing it was afraid of being seen. Please help me. I can't leave. He watches everything. My daughter is at 114 Maple Street with my mother. Her name is Lily. She's 4. If something happens to me, please make sure she's safe. Dominic Chains. Barrera read it 3 times, his coffee growing cold in front of him, his half-eaten plate of eggs forgotten. The waitress who'd slipped it under his plate was across the diner now, refilling waters and smiling at customers like nothing had happened. But Dominic had seen her hands shake when she'd set down his food. He'd seen the bruise on her wrist, half hidden by her sleeve. He'd seen the way her eyes kept darting to the man in the corner booth, a thick-necked guy in a polo shirt who watched her every move with the possessive attention of someone who believed he owned what he was looking at. Dominic had been riding with the Hells Angels for 23 years. He'd seen a lot of things in that time: violence and brotherhood, betrayal and redemption, the full spectrum of human behavior, from its darkest depths to its surprising heights. He'd learned to read situations quickly, to spot danger before it arrived, to trust his instincts even when they led him into uncomfortable places. His instincts now were screaming. He folded the note carefully and slipped it into the pocket of his leather vest next to his heart. Then he finished his coffee, left a $50 bill on the table, 10 times what his meal had cost, and walked out of the diner without looking back. The parking lot was empty, except for his Harley and a black pickup truck that he assumed belonged to the man in the corner booth. Dominic memorized the license plate automatically, a habit from decades of paying attention to details that might matter later. Then he mounted his bike, pulled out his phone, and made a call. "Razor, it's Chains. I need you to run a plate for me." 20 minutes later, he had a name: Vincent Morrow. The truck was registered to an address in the next county over. A quick search turned up a few more details: a construction company, a couple of minor assault charges that had been pleaded down or dismissed, a divorce filing from 6 years ago that had been withdrawn. The pattern was familiar. Dominic had seen it before, more times than he wanted to count. Men who controlled through fear. Women who couldn't leave because leaving was more dangerous than staying. A system that failed to protect the people who needed protection most. He thought about the waitress, her shaking hands, her forced smile, the desperate hope in the note she'd slipped under his plate. She'd taken an enormous risk, trusting a stranger, trusting him. She'd looked at his leather vest, his patches, his scarred knuckles and weathered face, and she'd decided that he was her best chance. He wasn't going to let her down. The diner was called Rosie's, a roadside place about 30 miles outside of Tulsa that catered to truckers and travelers. Dominic had stopped there on a whim, hungry after a long morning of writing, looking for nothing more than a hot meal and a few minutes of rest. Instead, he'd found something else entirely. He rode back to the clubhouse, a converted warehouse on the outskirts of the city, where the Oklahoma chapter of the Hells Angels had been headquartered for the past 15 years. It was midday on a Wednesday, which meant most of the brothers were at work or running errands, but a few bikes were parked out front, enough for what he needed. Inside, he found Razor at the bar, nursing a beer and watching a baseball game on the ancient television mounted above the bottles. Razor was the club's unofficial intelligence officer, a former IT specialist who'd traded a cubicle for a motorcycle and never looked back. If anyone could dig up information on Vincent Morrow, it was him. "Got something for you," Dominic said, sliding onto the stool beside him. "Need the full workup, everything you can find." He handed over the note. Razor read it, his expression darkening with each word. "Jesus!" He set down the note and reached for his laptop, which was never far from his side. "You get a look at the guy?" Corner booth, big, thick neck, polo shirt. Watched her like he owned her. Dominic's jaw tightened. "She's got a bruise on her wrist. Probably more we can't see." "And the daughter?" 114 Maple Street, with the grandmother. Dominic pulled out his phone and showed Razor the license plate photo. Trucks registered to Vincent Morrow. Construction company, history of assault charges that went nowhere. Razor's fingers were already flying across the keyboard. "Give me an hour. I'll have everything there is to know about this guy." Dominic nodded and stood. "I'll be in the back. Let me know when you've got something." He walked through the clubhouse to the small room he used as an office. A cluttered space filled with paperwork and motorcycle parts, a desk buried under stacks of files and old photographs. He sat down heavily in his chair and stared at the wall, thinking about the waitress. He didn't even know her name. That bothered him more than it should have. She'd trusted him with her life, with her daughter's life, and he didn't know what to call her. She was just a woman in a diner, trapped in a situation that had no easy exits, reaching out to a stranger because she'd run out of other options. He thought about his own daughter, grown now with kids of her own, living in California with a husband who treated her like gold. He thought about what he would do if someone laid a hand on her, if someone tried to control her, if someone made her feel so afraid that she had to slip notes to strangers begging for help. He knew exactly what he would do. The question was whether he was willing to do the same thing for a woman he didn't know. But even as he asked the question, he knew the answer. It wasn't really a question at all. An hour later, Razor knocked on his door. "Got it all," he said, dropping a folder on Dominic's desk. "And it's worse than we thought." Dominic opened the folder and started reading. Vincent Morrow, 42 years old, owner of Morrow Construction. 3 previous domestic violence complaints, all from different women, all dropped before they went to trial. A restraining order that had been violated twice without consequence. A custody battle with his ex-wife that had ended when she'd suddenly moved out of state and stopped pursuing it. And then there was the waitress, Danielle Porter, 28 years old, single mother of a 4-year-old named Lily. She'd been with Morrow for about 8 months, according to the records Razor had pieced together. Before that, she'd lived with her mother, worked at a grocery store, kept a low profile. No criminal record, no history of trouble. Just a young woman trying to raise her daughter and make ends meet. Until Vincent Morrow had entered her life. "There's more," Razor said, his voice grim. "I talked to a buddy of mine in the sheriff's department, off the record. He says Morrow's connected, knows people, has friends in the courthouse. That's why the charges never stick. The system's rigged in his favor." Dominic closed the folder. His hands were steady, but inside something was burning. A cold, focused anger that had nothing to do with rage and everything to do with purpose. "What do you want to do?" Razor asked. Dominic thought about the note in his pocket, the shaky handwriting, the desperate plea. "Please make sure she's safe." "Call the brothers," he said. "All of them. Every chapter within driving distance. I want a full meeting tonight." Razor's eyebrows rose. "You're talking about 200 guys, maybe more." "I know exactly what I'm talking about." Dominic stood, his chair scraping against the concrete floor. "That woman asked for help. She looked at everything I represent, the leather, the patches, all of it, and she decided I was worth trusting. I'm not going to prove her wrong." "And Morrow?" Dominic's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, something cold and hard and absolutely certain. "Morrow's going to learn that there are some people you don't mess with, and some people you don't fail to protect." He walked past Razor, out of the office, into the main room of the clubhouse. The afternoon sun was streaming through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. In a few hours, this space would be filled with brothers from across the state, men who'd sworn to stand beside each other, to protect the innocent, to uphold a code that outsiders would never understand. Dominic pulled out the note and read it one more time. "Please help me. I can't leave. He watches everything. I'm coming," he said quietly to a woman who couldn't hear him, in a diner 30 miles away. "Just hold on a little. Longer. I'm coming." They came from Oklahoma City and Tulsa, from Wichita and Dallas, from small towns with names most people had never heard. They came on Harleys and Indians, on custom choppers and vintage bikes that had been in families for generations. They came in leather vests covered with patches that told stories of brotherhood and sacrifice, of years spent riding together through every kind of weather. By 8 o'clock that night, the clubhouse parking lot was full. By 9, bikes were lined up along the street, around the block, filling every available space within a quarter mile. The rumble of engines had been constant for hours, a rolling thunder that shook the windows and announced to anyone listening that something significant was happening. Dominic stood at the front of the main room, looking out at the sea of faces. 217 men and women, by his count, brothers and sisters from 9 different chapters, all of them answering the call he'd put out that afternoon. Some had driven 6 hours to be here. Some had left jobs or family dinners or prior commitments without explanation. When a full assembly was called, you showed up. That was the code. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. The room fell silent immediately. "I know this was short notice. I know some of you have questions about why you're here. I'm going to explain." He pulled out the note, wrinkled now from being handled, the ink slightly smeared, and held it up. This afternoon, I stopped at a diner about 30 miles from here, a place called Rosie's. I was just passing through looking for a meal, but the waitress who served me slipped this under my plate. He read the note aloud, every word, landing like a stone in the silent room. Please help me. I can't leave. He watches everything. My daughter is at 114 Maple Street with my mother. Her name is Lily. She's 4. If something happens to me, please make sure she's safe. Dominic lowered the note and looked at his brothers. Her name is Danielle Porter. She's 28 years old. She's got a 4-year-old daughter named Lily, and she's been trapped in an abusive relationship with a man named Vincent Morrow for the past 8 months. He gestured to Razor, who stepped forward with a stack of printed documents. Morrow's got a history. 3 previous domestic violence complaints, all dropped before trial. A restraining order that's been violated twice. He's connected, knows people in the courthouse, has friends who make problems disappear. Dominic's jaw tightened. The system has failed her. The police can't help or won't. She's got nowhere to turn. He paused, letting the weight of the situation settle over the room. Except us. A murmur ran through the crowd. Dominic held up his hand for silence. I know what some of you are thinking. This isn't club business. This woman isn't family. She's a stranger who slipped a note to the first person she thought might help. And you're right. By the rules, we don't owe her anything. He looked around the room, meeting eyes, reading faces. But I'm going to tell you something. When that woman looked at me, at my vest, my patches, everything I represent, she saw someone she could trust. She saw someone who might actually do something when everyone else had looked away. She took the biggest risk of her life, trusting a stranger with her daughter's safety, because she'd run out of other options. Dominic's voice dropped, becoming harder. I've been writing for 23 years. I've seen us do a lot of things, some good, some bad, some I'm not proud of. But the one thing that's always mattered, the one thing that separates us from everyone else, is that we protect our own. We stand up when others sit down. We fight when others run. He held up the note again. This woman isn't technically one of us, but she believed we could help her. She believed in what we stand for, even if she doesn't know what that is. And I say that makes her one of us. I say that when someone reaches out like this, desperate, terrified, with nowhere else to go, we answer. That's who we are. That's what the patches mean. The room was absolutely silent. 217 faces, all of them fixed on Dominic, all of them processing what he was asking. Then a voice came from the back, a woman named Vera, who ran the Wichita chapter and had been riding longer than most of the men in the room. What's the plan? Dominic felt something loosen in his chest. The question meant she was in. The question meant they were all in. Tomorrow morning, we ride to Rosie's diner, all of us, every bike, every brother, every sister. He looked around the room. We're not going to touch Morrow. We're not going to threaten him or hurt him or give him any reason to call the cops. What we're going to do is show him and show Danielle that she's not alone anymore. He nodded to Razor, who pulled up a map on the projector screen. The diner opens at 6. Danielle's shift starts at 7. Morrow usually shows up around 8, sits in the corner booth, and stays until she's done. He drives her to work, drives her home, controls every minute of her day. Dominic pointed to the screen. We're going to be there when she arrives. 200 bikes in the parking lot, 200 brothers and sisters who've got her back, and we're going to stay there all day, eating, drinking coffee, letting Morrow see exactly what he's up against if he tries anything. And then, someone asked, and then we talk to her. We offer her a way out, a safe house, protection, whatever she needs. We've got connections with domestic violence shelters, lawyers who do pro bono work, people who can help her disappear if that's what it takes. Dominic's voice was steady. But we don't force anything. We don't make decisions for her. We just show her that she's got options she didn't have before. That there are people who will stand beside her no matter what. Another silence. Then Vera spoke again. What about the daughter, Lily? She's safe for now, with the grandmother at 114 Maple Street. Dominic had confirmed this earlier, through contacts Razor had reached out to. If things go sideways, we've got people who can get there fast. But the priority is Danielle. We get her out, we get her safe, and then we figure out the rest. Vera nodded slowly. I'm in. Me too, said a man near the front. Big Mike from the Dallas chapter, a former defensive lineman who'd found brotherhood on 2 wheels after his football career ended. The voices came faster after that, rolling through the room like a wave. In. Count me in. I'm writing. Let's do this. Within 5 minutes, every person in the room had committed. 217 voices, all of them united behind a woman they'd never met because one of their brothers had asked them to stand up. Dominic felt the weight of it settle onto his shoulders, the responsibility, the trust, the knowledge that what happened next could change lives forever. He'd made promises before, to people who needed help, and he'd always tried to keep them. But this was different. This was bigger. This was the kind of thing that defined who you really were. "Get some sleep," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "We ride at 5. Be here, gassed up and ready. And remember, we're not there to start trouble. We're there to end it. Peacefully, if we can. Whatever it takes, if we have to." The crowd began to disperse, voices buzzing with plans and preparations. Brothers who hadn't seen each other in months clapped shoulders and caught up. Sisters huddled in groups, discussing logistics and contingencies. The energy in the room was electric, the particular hum that came before something important, before a ride that actually mattered. Dominic stayed at the front, watching them go, until only Razor remained. "You think this will work?" Razor asked quietly. "I think it has to." Dominic looked at the note still clutched in his hand. "She trusted us. She trusted me. I'm not going to let her down. And if Morrow doesn't back off? If he decides to make a stand?" Dominic's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something cold and certain. "Then he'll learn what 200 Hell's Angels look like when they're protecting one of their own." He walked out of the clubhouse into the cool night air, past the rows of motorcycles gleaming under the streetlights, to his own bike at the edge of the lot. He sat on it for a long moment, not starting the engine, just breathing. Tomorrow would change everything. For Danielle, for her daughter, for the man who thought he could control them. The world was about to shift, and Dominic was the one pushing it. He thought about his daughter again, about the fierce, independent woman she'd become, about the granddaughters who called him Papa and climbed. Onto his bike for slow rides around the backyard. He thought about what he would want someone to do if they were in trouble, if they were trapped, if they had no one else to turn to. He would want someone to show up, someone to stand beside them, someone to say, without words, that they weren't alone anymore. That's what he was going to do for Danielle Porter. Tomorrow, at dawn, 200 motorcycles would ride toward a diner on the edge of nowhere, and when they arrived, a woman who'd been invisible, trapped, controlled, erased, would finally be seen. Dominic started his engine, the rumble filling the empty parking lot, and rode home to get a few hours of sleep. He had a promise to keep. The sun was just cresting the horizon when the first motorcycles appeared on Route 60. Danielle Porter was wiping down the counter at Rosie's diner, trying to shake the fog of another sleepless night when she heard the rumble. At first she thought it was thunder, a storm rolling in from the west, the way they sometimes did in early spring. But the sky outside was clear, painted in shades of pink and gold, and the sound was too steady, too rhythmic, too close. She walked to the window and looked out. What she saw made her grip the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles went white. Motorcycles, dozens of them, pouring into the parking lot like a river of chrome and leather. They came in formation 2 by 2, their headlights blazing even in the growing daylight. The first wave filled the lot within minutes. The second wave spilled onto the grass, the shoulder of the road, anywhere they could find space, and still they kept coming, more and more, an endless procession that seemed to have no end. Danielle's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She thought about the note she'd slipped under that man's plate yesterday, the desperate, foolish, hopeless act of a woman who'd run out of options. She'd expected nothing to come of it. She'd expected to be ignored, the way she'd been ignored by everyone else. The police who told her they couldn't help until something actually happened. The social worker who'd given her a pamphlet and a phone number that was always busy. The friends and family who'd slowly drifted away because Vincent had made sure they would. She'd expected to be alone. But now, standing at the window of Rosie's diner, watching 200 motorcycles fill the parking lot and beyond, she understood that she wasn't alone anymore. The door opened, and a man walked in. She recognized him immediately, the same man from yesterday, the one she'd trusted with her life. He was tall and weathered, with gray in his beard and scars on his knuckles, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd long ago stopped caring what other people thought. "Danielle." He said her name like he knew her, like they'd been friends for years instead of strangers who'd exchanged nothing but a note and a $50 tip. "My name's Dominic. People call me Chains. I know who you are." Her voice came out as a whisper. "I saw your patches." "Then you know what we're about." Dominic stopped a few feet away, giving her space, not crowding her. "I read your note. I made some calls, and I brought some friends." Danielle looked past him, through the window, at the sea of leather-clad riders now dismounting from their bikes. Men and women of every age, every background, all of them wearing the same patches, all of them looking toward the diner with expressions of quiet determination. "Why?" The question came out before she could stop it. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why would you do this?" "Because you asked." Dominic's voice was gentle but firm. "Because you looked at a stranger and decided he was worth trusting. Because somewhere along the line, you ran out of people who would help, and you reached out anyway." He paused. "That took courage, Danielle. More courage than most people have. I wasn't going to let that go unanswered." Danielle felt the tears coming and didn't try to stop them. They spilled down her cheeks, hot and fast, releasing something she'd been holding inside for months. The fear, the shame, the bone-deep exhaustion of fighting a battle she couldn't win. "He's going to be here soon," she said, her voice breaking. "Vincent. He drops me off, but he comes back around 8. He sits in the corner and watches me all day. If he sees all these people, that's the point." Dominic's expression didn't change. "We want him to see. We want him to understand that you're not alone anymore, that if he tries anything at all, he's going to have to go through every single person in that parking lot. He'll be angry. When he's angry, Danielle stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "He's not going to touch you. Not today. Not ever again." Dominic reached into his vest and pulled out a card. "This is the number for a shelter in Tulsa. They've got beds, they've got security, they've got lawyers who can help you get a restraining order that actually sticks. Whenever you're ready, today, tomorrow, next week, you call that number and they'll take care of you." Danielle took the card with trembling fingers. It was small and plain, just a phone number and an address, but it felt like a lifeline thrown across an ocean. "What about Lily, my daughter?" "We've got people watching the house on Maple Street. Your mother and Lily are safe. If anything happens, they'll be moved somewhere secure within minutes." Dominic's voice softened. "You did the right thing, telling me about her. We're going to make sure she stays safe no matter what." The door opened again, and more riders came in. A woman with silver hair and kind eyes, a massive man with tattoos covering his arms, a young couple who looked barely old enough to vote. They spread out through the diner, taking seats at the counter and in the booths, ordering coffee and breakfast like this was the most normal thing in the world. Within 15 minutes, every table was full. The kitchen was working overtime, the other waitresses scrambling to keep up with the sudden rush. And still more riders waited outside, leaning against their bikes, watching the road for any sign of Vincent Morrow's black pickup truck. Danielle moved through the crowd in a daze, taking orders and refilling coffees, feeling the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on her. Not threatening, not judging, but protective. Watchful. Ready. At 8:07, the black pickup pulled into the lot. Vincent Morrow climbed out slowly, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and something that looked almost like fear as he took in the scene before him. The parking lot was a sea of motorcycles. Leather-clad riders stood in clusters, their postures relaxed but alert, their eyes tracking his every move. He walked toward the diner, his steps faltering slightly, his usual swagger diminished by the sheer number of people watching him. When he reached the door, a wall of riders shifted to block his path, not aggressively, not threateningly, just standing there. Present. Unmovable. Dominic stepped forward. "Vincent Morrow." It wasn't a question. Vincent's eyes narrowed. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm a friend of Danielle's. We're all friends of Danielle's." Dominic gestured at the crowd behind him. "And we're here to make sure she has a good day at work. A safe day. You understand what I'm saying? I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing. No game." Dominic's voice was calm, almost pleasant. "Just a bunch of people who care about a young woman and her daughter. People who want to make sure they're protected. People who will be paying very close attention to what happens next." Vincent's face reddened. "You can't do this. This is harassment. I'll call the cops." "Go ahead." Dominic didn't blink. "Call them. Tell them 200 people are eating breakfast at a diner. Tell them we're drinking coffee and leaving big tips and being polite to the waitstaff. I'm sure they'll be very concerned." The The standoff lasted for a long moment, Vincent glaring, Dominic waiting, the crowd of riders watching with the patient attention of people who had all day and weren't going anywhere. Finally, Vincent took a step back. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and venomous. "You think you can protect her forever? You think these people are going to be here every day? I think you should be very careful about what you do next." Dominic's tone didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. "Because we know where you live. We know where you work. We know about the 3 women who filed complaints against you and the restraining order you violated. We know everything, Vincent. And if anything happens to Danielle, anything at all, we will find out, and we will respond." He let the words hang in the air. "Now, you've got a choice. You can walk away, go home, move on with your life and leave this woman alone. Or you can make this difficult and find out what 200 Hell's Angels look like when they're angry." Dominic smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'd recommend option 1. Vincent stood frozen, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. Danielle watched from inside the diner, her heart in her throat, waiting to see what he would do. For a moment, she thought he might explode, might charge at Dominic, might start screaming, might do something stupid that would justify whatever came next. Vincent had never been good at backing down. His pride was too big, his need for control too absolute. But something in his eyes shifted as he looked around at the assembled riders. He was calculating, she realized, weighing the odds. For the first time in his life, he was facing a situation he couldn't manipulate, couldn't control, couldn't bully his way through. "Fine," he said finally, the word coming out like it was being dragged over broken glass. "Fine. You want her? You can have her. She's not worth this much trouble anyway." He turned and walked back to his truck, his shoulders rigid with humiliation. The crowd of riders parted to let him through, watching in silence as he climbed behind the wheel and started the engine. He paused, looking back at the diner one last time. Danielle met his eyes through the window, and for the first time in 8 months, she didn't look away. Then he was gone, the black pickup disappearing down Route 60, swallowed by the morning light. The parking lot erupted in cheers. Danielle stood at the window, watching the celebration, feeling something crack open inside her chest, something that had been frozen for so long she'd forgotten it was there. Hope, relief, the dizzying, terrifying possibility that she might actually be free. The door opened, and Dominic walked in. He crossed to where she stood, put a gentle hand on her shoulder, and said the words she'd been waiting 8 months to hear. "It's over, Danielle. You're safe now." And for the first time since Vincent Morrow had entered her life, she believed it. The riders stayed all day. They rotated in shifts, some eating, some standing guard in the parking lot, some riding slow patrols along Route 60 to make sure Vincent's truck didn't reappear. They were polite to the staff, generous with their tips, and unfailingly respectful to Danielle, who moved through her shift in a fog of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. Every time she refilled a coffee cup or delivered a plate of eggs, someone would catch her eye and nod. A small gesture, barely noticeable, but it said everything. "We're here. We've got you. You're not alone." Around 2 o'clock, during a brief lull between the lunch rush and the afternoon quiet, Dominic found her in the break room. She was sitting on a plastic chair, staring at the card he'd given her earlier, the phone number for the shelter blurring as her eyes filled with tears. "How are you holding up?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I don't know." Danielle wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to come back, or for this to all be a dream, or—" She shook her head. "This doesn't happen. Not to people like me. Things like this don't just work out. They do sometimes." Dominic crossed the room and sat down in the chair across from her. "Not always, not often enough. But sometimes the good guys win. Sometimes the person who reaches out finds someone who reaches back. Why me, though? Why did you—" She gestured vaguely at the diner, at the parking lot full of motorcycles, at the small army that had materialized overnight to protect her. "Why did you do all this for someone you don't even know?" Dominic was quiet for a moment, his weathered face thoughtful. 26 years ago, I was a different person," he said finally. "Angry, lost, making choices that were going to get me killed or locked up. And then I met someone, an old man, a veteran, who ran a motorcycle repair shop on the edge of town. I walked in looking to steal something, and he looked at me and saw, I don't know, Something worth saving, I guess. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. He didn't call the cops. He didn't lecture me or judge me. He just offered me a job. Minimum wage, sweeping floors, cleaning parts. Said I could work off whatever I was planning to take, and if I showed up every day for a month, he'd teach me how to ride. Did you? Show up every day? I did, and he taught me, not just about motorcycles, about life, about what it means to be a man, to have a code, to stand for something. He introduced me to the club, helped me find a family when I didn't have one. Dominic's voice softened. He saved my life, Danielle, and he did it for no reason except that he saw someone who needed help, and he decided to help. He looked at her directly. That's why I'm here. That's why we're all here. Because somewhere along the line, someone helped each of us when we didn't deserve it, and we made a promise, to ourselves, to each other, that we'd pay it forward, that we'd be the ones who reach back when someone reaches out. Danielle felt the tears spilling over again. She didn't try to stop them. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. I don't have anything to give. I can barely afford to feed my daughter, and you've done all this. You don't owe us anything. Dominic's voice was firm. This isn't a transaction. This is family, and family doesn't keep score. He stood, reaching into his vest pocket, and pulled out a thick envelope. The brothers took up a collection. It's not charity. It's a gift. Use it for whatever you need. First and last month's rent on a new place, security deposit, whatever it takes to start over. Danielle stared at the envelope, unable to move. There's also this. Dominic set a second item on the table, a cell phone, new and still, in its packaging. Prepaid, untraceable. Morrow can't find you through this. The shelter's number is already programmed in, along with mine and a few others. If you ever feel unsafe, if you ever need anything, you call. Day or night. Someone will answer. I can't. Danielle's voice broke. This is too much. I can't accept. You can, and you will. Dominic's tone brooked no argument. Because your daughter needs you strong. She needs you free. And accepting help when you need it isn't weakness. It's wisdom. He walked to the door, then paused and looked back. Your shift ends at 5. When it does, there's going to be a van waiting outside. It'll take you to the shelter in Tulsa. Safe, secure, anonymous. Your mother and Lily are already being brought there. By tonight, you'll all be together in a place where Vincent can't find you. Danielle stood, her legs unsteady, the envelope clutched in her hands. What if he tries something? What if he doesn't just let me go? Then we deal with it. Dominic's expression was calm but certain. We've got people watching him. We've got lawyers ready to file papers. We've got resources he can't match and connections he can't buy. He smiled slightly. Vincent Morrow has spent his whole life controlling people who couldn't fight back. He's never met people who could. That changes today. He left her alone in the break room, the envelope heavy in her hands, the new phone sitting on the table like a lifeline. Danielle stood there for a long moment, letting the reality sink in. She was getting out. After 8 months of fear and pain and hopelessness, she was actually getting out. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She took orders and delivered food and smiled at customers, but her mind was already somewhere else, in a shelter in Tulsa, in a new apartment she hadn't found yet, in a future that had seemed impossible just 24 hours ago. At 5 o'clock, she hung up her apron for the last time. The parking lot had thinned by then. Most of the riders had headed home, their mission accomplished, but a core group remained. Dominic and Razor, Vera from the Wichita chapter, Big Mike from Dallas, and about 20 others who'd volunteered to escort her to safety. A white van was waiting near the entrance, its engine idling. A woman stood beside it, middle-aged, kind-faced, wearing a lanyard with an ID badge from the shelter. Danielle. The woman smiled warmly. I'm Patricia. I'm going to take you to your new home. Danielle looked at the van, then back at the diner where she'd spent the past 2 years of her life. It wasn't much. A roadside restaurant in the middle of nowhere, but it had been hers. A place where she'd felt, if not safe, at least useful. A place where she'd earned money to feed her daughter and tried, day after day, to hold her life together. Now she was leaving it behind, all of it. Your mother and daughter arrived about an hour ago, Patricia continued. They're waiting for you. Lily keeps asking when Mommy's coming. The mention of her daughter broke something loose in Danielle's chest. She turned to Dominic, who was standing nearby with his brothers, watching the scene unfold. I don't know how to say goodbye, she said, her voice thick. I don't know how to thank you for what you've done. Then don't say goodbye. Dominic stepped forward and pulled her into a brief, fierce hug. "Say, see you later. Because this isn't the end, Danielle. This is the beginning, and we're going to be checking on you. Making sure you're okay. Making sure you've got everything you need to build the life you deserve." He released her and stepped back. "You're one of us now. That doesn't expire." Danielle looked at the assembled riders, these strangers who'd become her protectors, her advocates, her family. They nodded at her, one by one, small gestures of respect and encouragement. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate, but the only ones she had. "Thank you all." Then she climbed into the van, the door closed behind her, and Patricia pulled out of the parking lot onto Route 60. Danielle watched through the back window as the diner grew smaller, as the knot of motorcycles became specks in the distance, as the road she'd traveled every day for 2 years disappeared behind a curve. She was leaving everything she knew, but she was also leaving everything that had hurt her. The fear, the control, the man who had made her feel like nothing, like less than nothing, like something to be owned rather than loved. That was over now. In her pocket, the new phone was warm against her hip. In her hands, the envelope full of money felt like possibility. And somewhere ahead, in a shelter she'd never seen, her mother and daughter were waiting, safe, protected, ready to start over together. Danielle leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. For the first time in 8 months, she let herself imagine a future, a real future, not just survival. An apartment with Lily's drawings on the refrigerator, a job where no one watched her every move, mornings where she woke up without fear, nights where she slept without listening for footsteps. It wasn't certain, nothing was certain, but it was possible now in a way it hadn't been before. And that possibility, fragile, precious, hard-won, was worth everything. The van drove on toward Tulsa, toward safety, toward the life Danielle Porter had finally found the courage to claim. Behind her, in a parking lot 30 miles away, Dominic Barrera watched until the vehicle disappeared from sight. Then he turned to his brothers and sisters, who were already mounting their bikes, ready to head home. "Good work today," he said. "All of you. This is what we're about. This is why we ride." Engines roared to life, one after another, filling the evening air with thunder. The riders pulled out of the lot in formation, heading back to their chapters, their families, their lives. But they carried something with them, a story they would tell for years to come. About a waitress who slipped a note to a stranger. About 200 riders who answered the call. About what happened when someone finally decided that a woman in trouble was worth protecting. The story would spread the way such stories always did. It would inspire other acts of courage, other moments of reaching out and reaching back. It would remind people that they weren't alone, that somewhere out there, someone was willing to stand up for them. That was the legacy Dominic had hoped for. That was the point of everything they'd done. 6 months later, on a warm Saturday afternoon in September, Danielle Porter stood in the doorway of her new apartment and watched her daughter blow out 4 candles on a birthday cake. The apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms, a galley kitchen, a living room that doubled as a dining room, but it was theirs. The walls were painted a soft yellow that Lily had picked out herself. The refrigerator was covered in her drawings, just as Danielle had imagined, and the front door had 3 locks, installed by a friend from the shelter, who'd insisted it was necessary, even though Danielle hadn't felt afraid in months. "Make a wish, baby," Danielle said, her phone raised to capture the moment. Lily squeezed her eyes shut, her small face scrunched with concentration. Then she blew, and the candles flickered out, and the room erupted in cheers from the small group gathered around the table. Danielle's mother was there, clapping and wiping her eyes. Patricia from the shelter had come, bringing a gift bag stuffed with tissue paper. 2 women from Danielle's new job, she worked at a nonprofit now, helping other domestic violence survivors navigate the system, had stopped by with balloons and a stuffed unicorn. And in the corner, sitting slightly apart from the others, was Dominic. He'd come alone, riding his Harley across 200 miles of highway to be here for a birthday party. He was wearing a clean shirt instead of his leather vest, looking almost uncomfortable out of his usual uniform, but his eyes were warm as he watched Lily tear into her presence. "You didn't have to come," Danielle said, crossing the room to stand beside him. "It's a long way for a kid's birthday party. Wouldn't have missed it." Dominic's voice was gruff, the way it always got when he was feeling something he didn't want to name. Besides, I wanted to see how you were doing, really doing, not just what you tell me on the phone. Danielle looked around her apartment, at her daughter laughing over a new coloring book, at her mother chatting with Patricia, at the life she'd built from the ashes of everything she'd escaped. "I'm good," she said, and meant it. "Better than good. I'm actually happy. I didn't think I'd ever feel that again." "You earned it." Dominic turned to face her. "Every bit of it. You took a risk, you reached out, you did the hard work of starting over. That's not nothing, Danielle. That's everything. I couldn't have done it without you, without all of you. Sure, you could have. Eventually. Might have taken longer, might have been harder, but you would have found a way." He smiled slightly. "You're stronger than you know. You always were. You just needed someone to remind you." Lily came running over, a piece of cake clutched in her hands, frosting smeared across her cheeks. "Mr. Dominic, do you want cake? Mama made it herself. It's chocolate." Dominic crouched down to her level, his weathered face softening in a way that still surprised Danielle every time she saw it. "I would love some cake, Lily. Thank you for asking. Mama says you're the one who helped us when we were scared." Lily's voice was matter of fact, the way children's voices are when they're stating something they believe with absolute certainty. "She says you and your friends came on motorcycles and made the bad man go away." Dominic glanced up at Danielle, who shrugged helplessly. Some things couldn't be simplified for a 4-year-old, and some things shouldn't be hidden. "That's right," he said. "We helped your mama when she needed it, and now she's helping other people, just like we helped her. That's how it works." Lily considered this with the gravity only small children can muster. "Like sharing?" "Exactly like sharing." Dominic accepted the plate of cake she thrust toward him. "You're a smart kid, Lily. Your mama's raising you right." Lily beamed and ran back to her presents, already forgetting the conversation in favor of more exciting things. Dominic straightened up, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "She's something else. She's everything." Danielle watched her daughter, feeling the familiar swell of love and protectiveness that had driven her to slip a note under a stranger's plate all those months ago. "She's the reason I found the courage to reach out, the reason I kept going when everything felt impossible. Kids have a way of doing that, making us braver than we'd be on our own." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the party unfold around them. Danielle thought about how far she'd come, from a diner parking lot where a man controlled her every move, to this sunny apartment where she controlled her own destiny. It seemed impossible, sometimes, like a story that happened to someone else, but the scars were still there, beneath the surface. The nights when she woke in a cold sweat, certain she'd heard Vincent's footsteps. The moments when a loud noise made her flinch, when a man's raised voice sent her heart racing. The therapy sessions she attended every week, learning to untangle the damage that had been done to her. Recovery wasn't linear. It wasn't easy. But it was happening, slowly, steadily, one day at a time. "I have something for you," Dominic said, reaching into his pocket. "Well, for both of you. A gift from the club." He handed her an envelope, smaller than the one he'd given her at the diner, but thick with something other than cash. Danielle opened it and found a stack of papers. Legal documents, official-looking, with stamps and signatures she didn't recognize. "What is this?" "Restraining order. Permanent. One of our lawyers pushed it through. Someone owed him a favor, and he called it in." Dominic's voice was calm, but there was satisfaction beneath the surface. "Vincent Morrow can't come within 500 feet of you, Lily, or your mother. If he does, he goes to jail. No excuses, no exceptions." Danielle stared at the papers, her hands trembling. "I tried to get one before. They said there wasn't enough evidence. They said, I know what they said. The system failed you, but we've got people who know how to work the system, how to make it do what it's supposed to do." Dominic's expression hardened slightly. "Morrow is also being investigated for tax fraud. Construction companies got some irregularities that caught someone's attention. He's going to be too busy dealing with the IRS to bother anyone for a long time." Danielle didn't ask how the investigation had started, or who had pointed the authorities in the right direction. Some questions were better left unasked. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling inadequate for the 1,000th time. "I don't know how I'll ever—" "You already have," Dominic cut her off gently. "The work you're doing now, at the nonprofit, helping other women, other families, people who are where you were 6 months ago, that's how you pay it back. That's how the chain keeps going." He was right, Danielle realized. She'd known it intellectually, but hearing him say it made it real. The help she'd received wasn't meant to end with her. It was meant to flow through her, outward, to the next person who needed it, and the next, and the next. "There's one more thing," Dominic said. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out something small, a patch, round and embroidered, with a design Danielle recognized. The Hells Angels insignia, but modified somehow, different. "This is a friend patch," he explained. "It's not membership, that's a whole different thing, but it means you're under our protection, permanently. Anyone who sees this knows you've got family in the club, that you're not someone to be messed with." He pressed it into her palm, a small circle of leather and thread that weighed almost nothing but meant everything. "You've earned this, Danielle, not because of what we did for you, but because of what you've done since. The courage it took to start over, the way you're using your experience to help others. That's what we're about. That's what the patch represents." Danielle looked down at the patch, then up at Dominic. She thought about the terrified woman who'd scribbled a desperate note on the back of an order ticket, hoping against hope that someone would care enough to help. That woman still lived inside her. But she wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't powerless. She had a voice, a community, a purpose. She had family. "Will you come back?" she asked. "For Lily's next birthday? She'd love to see the motorcycles again." Dominic smiled, a real smile, warm and unguarded. "Try and stop me." He stayed for another hour, eating cake and watching Lily open presents and talking with Danielle's mother about the old days, about riding, about the strange and winding paths that brought people together. When he finally stood to leave, the sun was setting outside the window, painting the apartment in shades of gold. Danielle walked him to the door. "Thank you," she said one more time, "for everything, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for believing I was worth saving." "You were never invisible, Danielle. You were just surrounded by people who refused to look." Dominic pulled her into a brief hug. "Keep being brave, keep helping others, and call if you ever need anything. Anything at all." "I will." He walked down the stairs, out to the parking lot where his Harley waited. Danielle watched from the window as he mounted up, kicked the engine to life, and rode away, a lone figure disappearing into the sunset, carrying with him the story of a waitress who'd slipped a note to a stranger and found salvation. Lily appeared at her side, pressing her small face against the glass. "Is Mr. Dominic coming back, Mama?" "Yes, baby, he'll be back." "Good." Lily's voice was satisfied. "I like him. He's nice." "He is nice." Danielle smoothed her daughter's hair, feeling the weight of the patch in her pocket, the papers on the table, the future stretching out before them like an open road. "He's family." They stood at the window together, mother and daughter, watching the last light fade from the sky. Behind them, the apartment was warm and full of birthday debris, wrapping paper and cake crumbs, and the scattered evidence of celebration. It wasn't perfect. Life never was. There would be hard days ahead, setbacks and struggles, moments when the past reached out with cold fingers and tried to drag her back. But Danielle had learned something in the past 6 months. She'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting in spite of it. She'd learned that help existed for those brave enough to ask for it. She'd learned that family wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was a stranger in a diner, a note slipped under a plate, 200 motorcycles filling a parking lot at dawn. She'd learned that she was stronger than she'd ever known. And she'd learned that the chain of kindness, once started, never truly ended. It just kept going, from person to person, hand to hand, heart to heart, connecting the broken to the healed, the desperate to the hopeful, the lost to the found. Danielle was part of that chain now, not just as someone who'd been helped, but as someone who helped others. That was her purpose. That was her legacy. That was the gift she'd carry forward for the rest of her life. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere on Route 60, a motorcycle engine rumbled through the evening air. And in a small apartment in Tulsa, a woman who'd once been trapped held her daughter close and smiled. She was free. She was safe. She was home.